Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Late Bloomer Actor podcast. Thanks for joining us. Today, I'm very excited by our guest on today. It's Aron Giagu. He is a director and writer of the indie film Are We Heroes with the follow-up series Warpath Chronicle. He's an actor and fight choreographer, training actors in fighting and stunts for screen with type talent here in Adelaide. He's also a father. In this episode, it's my first with a director. We talk about the actor-director relationship and how important both are in the collaboration of storytelling, especially for independent productions. Aron is a self-trained director, having grown up making stories and then taking on the role of filmmaking, initially putting together a small scene to showcase some fight choreography, which then turned into an immense battle scene and story arc for his initial feature production, Are We Heroes, which is then followed up with a fantastic fantasy series called Warpath Chronicle. We talk a lot about Warpath in this episode, naturally, and I have to say, you need to listen right through the whole episode for some exciting news on the project. There's been lots of Adelaide crew and actors involved in this project, and a lot of people following it and been looking forward to the end result. And I have to say, you're going to be very excited by the way we announce this. I love how we've delivered it, so I hope you do too. So thank you for joining me again, and here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. We're on episode number 10. Wow. Double digits. Aron is a writer, director, filmmaker, actor.
Questionable.
And
we'll go with the first two.
Fight choreographer.
Yes,
correct.
Yes.
Awesome. And I'm very excited to have you today because we've done a few things together. We've met on the set of one of your first productions.
It was the first one.
We Are Heroes.
Yeah.
We Are Heroes. Are we heroes?
Yep. He's on a roll.
Jeez. All right, let's start this whole podcast again. No.
It's all good.
Which was your first production, which was a feature-length fantasy film.
Yeah, it was.
And I was fortunate to work as just one of the Warpath soldiers.
You're a warrior.
Yeah, warrior.
Yeah, one of the knights.
Along with Rowan, my eldest son.
Yes, I remember that. He was a kid.
The 6-foot tall kid in the background with the black eye.
I remember that.
Was cool. That was awesome.
And Tim Hawkins was there. He had no shirt on.
That's right. I remember. Yeah. And,
got sunburn.
And a bunch of people that I've now got to know even better and better.
Yeah, that was a pretty good project.
So, Aron, you were my first director on the podcast, which is fantastic. And as I said, it's how we met. How about tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how did the world of filmmaking become something for you, what you do for a living now to work in with your filmmaking, and how did fantasy become a part of your life?
Okay.
Everything.
Yeah, all right. We'll go from the start then. So I grew up in Adelaide in a Greek home with strong Greek cultures and lots of great food. Just grew up loving everything to do with like Greek mythology. My dad used to pretty much, so that kind of like influenced my fantasy appreciation and larger than life stories. Just small town Adelaide boy who had a dream to make a film, which was that Are We Heroes, and then realised a lot of people wanted to get on board making that kind of genre, and that's how making everything else that I've done since then fell into my lap kind of thing.
Did you do anything as a kid, filmmaking at school, that sort of?
No, not really. I was sports. I was always into I played basketball for the school, basketball for a club, West Adelaide Bearcats.
Nice.
And I then just played footy, always sports. I was so sports driven. I think because I came from a Greek family and there was massive amount of influence, like, you got to play sport, do something physical. Yeah. You know, you play sport or nothing else. You know what I mean? So when I got older, I was like, you know what, sports is cool, and I was good at it. But I thought, I'm going to actually start doing some of the other things that I like doing.
Beautiful
storytelling.
Oh, cool. And then when did you sort of start with that, and how did you start?
I just started writing small stories, like fiction. And then started getting into screenwriting because other people were reading my fiction going, oh, this is way beyond your age.
Wow, okay.
Even my teachers at school were like, Aron, I want to read more.
Nice.
So that kind of pushed me to pursue that a little bit more. And then I didn't realise the process. So you write the story, then you look at the screenplays, and then you look at how scripts are all done and all that, and you're like, okay, it's a bit of a process here.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Awesome. So So you got into Are We Heroes was your first one.
Yeah.
When did you start developing that, and was it something that just worked along? Did you have a full script before you went on set? Is it one of those things that sort of just fell like a...
No, we had a script, but we weren't meant to do a battle. So basically, the reason I fell into Are We Heroes is because my younger brother, Pav, who is also in some other things I've done, you've met him, obviously.
Good bloke.
Good bloke, top bloke. He wanted to be an actor.
Okay.
And I was good at writing. And I was like, look, man, do you want me to write something that you can be in, be quite heavily involved in acting-wise, so you can at least have something go towards like your first ever like show reel or like set experience. And that's what I did Are We Heroes mainly for. But then we did a battle. So there was never meant to be this big battle in it. It was meant to be like a survival of a battle. These two brothers that survived, character-driven stuff. And then I had everyone barking in my ear, Aaron, you should do a battle. You're good at directing that stuff. I've never directed anything in my life. I'm just good at pretending to be Jean-Claude Van Damme. Do you know what I mean? I just wanted to have fun. So anyway, I went and did the battle, and the rest is history.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so your filmmaking style from there, had you made anything?
Not really.
Before? Because I know I've seen lots of YouTube stuff, but I think most of that was after.
All after, yeah. Are We Heroes was the
that
first
was your
thing.
first.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
But I had a DOP on that knew how to use a camera. Like I had no idea about any of that sort of stuff at that point. So he was pretty good at he lives in Perth now, but he was good at coming together and just wanting to do it too.
So when you knew you wanted to make this, you just didn't go and make it. You started reaching out and did a bit of research.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, a little bit. Like probably should have done more, but I did what I thought was enough.
So did you think yourself when you first started filming? How did you look at yourself? Did you say, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a director, or a writer? Did you have in your head, I am a person, or I'm just making a movie?
I just said, I'm making a movie. I'm an idiot making a movie that doesn't know what the limits are and what I'm supposed to be doing from I think from a professional point. I think I was professional, but I didn't know what to expect.
Fair enough.
You know, I talked to a lot of filmmakers after I did it, and they just laughed they were laughing at me, what did you do? How? Why? You know what I mean? I had all those questions thrown at me. I'm just because I had no experience, and that was like jumping into the deep end with not knowing how to swim.
So that big scene that I came up with Rowan, was that the first filming day or you'd already filmed?
That was the big filming day.
Because I've been around. I've been as an actor for a little while, so I've been on proper professional sets and independent sets and student films. And so I walked up there. I think we'd met before.
Yeah.
I can't remember how we got to meet, but ended up on your set. Either way, that's how we got to know each other. But from my standpoint, day one up there at what was the suburb? It was here in the middle of
Mount Crawford, on the Mount Crawford summit. Beautiful location. Yeah.
Everything was professional. You know, other than not having a row of movie trucks and catering vans and stuff like that, I did not know that we were on the set of someone that had never made a film before. So that's kudos to where you went.
Appreciate it. I'll thank my parents because they're very, Greek people. When you go to their house, they make sure you're looked after. You'll come here, I look after you, So it was very much like that. I just wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable. I think that's what it was, and not expect anything ridiculous from people. If they were too tired and didn't want to do the scene, then they're too tired and they can sit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Didn't want to have that.
And that's one thing that I wanted to talk to you about is your collaboration with people, both as other filmmakers, your crew and your DOPs and everyone that helped you, as well as the actors. I think that's just your personality. You're great with people. How did you develop that working set with everyone? Because everyone loves working with you, and no one walks away going, geez, Aaron was a prick today, or what, now there's moments where you're really stressed.
You must be talking to the wrong people.
Well, I'm talking personally. So a lot of it's about your collaboration and your culture and working with other people. It's the way I see it.
I think because I try to put myself in everyone's shoes, but before I make any decisions. So I always try to look at it from the other person's lens. So even if there's money involved or not, it's still, you have to have that consideration, because then when it comes to directing people, you don't want to get directed by someone who they don't care about you.
Yep.
You know, you kind of lose the soul from what you're supposed to be doing. You lose the feeling of it.
It becomes a job.
Yeah, I mean, it is a job, but at the same time, it's like you want to like your job. You want to give that story a little bit more, I think, energy. And if you're getting orders barked at you, I think you get the less of a result than if you're collaborating with a director.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And so that's your style then. As you said, you never really planned to be a director and you haven't really called yourself a director, but that makes you a director.
I guess so.
Now, so your future going forward, you've made a few more short films and some messing around. You're working with Blood City.
Helping those guys out, yeah.
And we'll talk about your big production, which is in South Australia, which I'll mention is Warpath Chronicle.
Yeah.
Which we will talk about later. I believe you've got some exciting stuff to discuss there. But what's your plans as a future filmmaker and director? Where would you like to take it? Is it going to become a career?
I'm not sure. Like, I just like to take everything as an experience. I'd love to direct films and I'd love to write films as a career, but at the same time, I also like to keep my feet on the ground and live day-to-day family life in a reality.
So you've got two
kids, married with 2 kids, and that takes you away from that a lot.
Of course, long days on set, especially when you're running everything. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I think definitely from a career point, I think if you want to go for like a directing role, there are things you can do to obviously fast pace all that. But I just enjoy creating things, whether it's for money or for free.
Yep.
So I'm director, yes, but I love just creating. So
okay.
I will always choose projects over the creation process. Then all those amazing actors are on it, but I'm not sure if I like that story or where that writing's going. I'm all about the creation process. Yeah.
And so that's sort of I've got a question later on, but it goes in now that you're very, very big on supporting South Australia.
Yeah.
Both crew, actors, and whatever comes from it.
Yeah.
Now I know that you've had when you're reaching out looking for support for Warpath or any of your projects, that you've had influences outside that have tried to take that away from you to bring in other states, and you've been reluctant to take the money and run, so to speak. Is that the right way to look at it?
There was some opportunity at the start, definitely, to sell the product, like the idea or the script, whatever you want to call it. There was multiple opportunities. But then again, I'm not part of the creation process. I've just created this story and handed it away for some money, which is a good thing if you want to just do that. But I knew a lot of people that wanted to get on board already, and I was like, I would rather be loyal to those people than take the money and just be like, yeah. So I think there's a lot of actors here that are so good, but like, when do you ever get a fantasy film or show get made in Australia? It's like so rare. So I'd rather give that opportunity and collaborate with people and meet people and have fun, and not just fun, but create this amazing story with people who are dying to play a cool character, like any of the characters, I guess, that were in my especially in Warpath, but in some of the things I've done.
Yes, and the big thing I want to talk to you about being fantasy, and you've already explained that where that's come from, your Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Again, Rowan would love this because he's studying archaeology at the moment.
Okay.
And he loves the mythology of stuff and the shit that he knows.
Yeah,
that.
Very interesting.
Whenever we were watching Jeopardy on TV, and they got a section on there for mythology, we're banging on his door, and he comes out and bang, 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 knows every question. But so bringing fantasy to Australia, or bringing fantasy to South Australia, like you said, it hasn't been done before. But what really surprised me, and I don't know whether you just found this out by accident, or how great the locations are here in South Australia for scenes for fantasy. How did you find that?
Well, how did I find the locations? How did you find that they were so good when you did find them? I remember just the first place I ever drove to that was outside of like suburbia. I drove to Gumaraka once, and I just drove past that big reserve with the water reserve. I think it's called the Warren Reserve or something.
Okay.
It just had it's like a dam basically, and there were rolling hills, and I just had a look, and I was like, man, we could film something cool here. And that's it. That's where the blessing and the problem started.
I love it.
So yeah, and then to find those locations, I must take my hat off to my scouting partner Nick Berry-Smith, who Nick's the DOP for Warpath, but we spent countless days driving around just to places that, might have been fenced off, and then we have to call that place and go, hey, can we just go for a walk in here? We're just doing this. They're usually pretty good.
Yeah, I love it.
You get those green lights to go in there. But he didn't have to do any of that as a DOP, but he did. So him and I definitely spent a lot of time looking.
And found
some really ripper spots.
And because he's got, being cinematography, the way he captures things on camera, he obviously sees that in his head
100%,
when he sees a location.
Yeah.
My first ever, almost my first, but my first lead role was on one of his productions. So
was
What Remains.
What Remains? Yeah, you were shooting zombies.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Done with the beard and dirty and
long hair.
Yeah, long hair wig.
Yeah.
But,
I remember that. Cool, though.
I remember sitting I was in my car driving from one location to another, and I grabbed my phone out and I said, no water, no food, world ending.
Yeah.
I put that on YouTube. I love it. I'm going to go and work. I used to watch it all the time.
So good.
But that's where I learnt, and I can see from what he did on that, you can see the same way he filmed your locations. Yeah. It's just to be able to take a location and capture it in such, this is my lack of artistic words coming up, but being able to see, just have the light right and the depths and the colours of the landscape and the right angles and then when you bring the characters in, it was absolutely brilliant. So, and again with the fight scenes, to be able to capture that in the background where you've got so much happening front of house sort of thing is just brilliant. So
that's when the collaboration happens. So that's when his the eyes for like making sure the shots are right and the colours are right and the placement of the shot, and my fight choreography all came into place. We just bound together and made epic things. That's awesome. Yeah.
And just a bit further on locations, some of the scenes you've got. So I remember seeing one with Mark Clement's character. He was like an old wall. Remember, it looked like an old rundown wall, and it's all moss covered, and dark. It was almost jungle-ish, and it's straight out of a Game of the Thrones Europe.
I know what you're talking about. Can I just touch on that? Can I touch on that? Something really funny. What we used to do when we used to go on set is we used to post the photos of where we were, but we would say we were in like Finland and Sweden, and it worked for a while. Heaps of people were like, oh wow, they must have got funding. They've gone heaps far. That does look like Sweden. Really, we weren't. We were all in Adelaide. But it's so funny. Yeah.
I love it.
Some of the comments were just great.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, that bridge now, that wall that you saw, there's now a property on that. Someone lives there.
Oh, okay.
So you can't get there anymore. So we're so lucky we got to film it. Yeah. Because it wasn't a property development there.
And you filmed a couple of scenes down south past Noarlunga on the cliffs and everything along there as well.
Second Valley, Port Wollonga, Port Adelaide, surprising. On the wharf, near the wharf there. I could list like probably about 30 locations that people would be like, you didn't film Warpath there. Yes, we did. We just were very smart with how we took the shots. St Kilda, like in the mangroves, that area, making it seem like one of our characters was like sailing across the seas through that area. There's just so many tricks you do with film.
Okay, that's awesome.
It's all about being smart with your with your money and with your eyes.
And that's as a filmmaker and self-funded. Would you say you're pretty much self-funded?
We pretty much funded ourselves with Warpath, and then just a collaboration of between myself, Mark Clement, Stephanie Rossi, Nick Berry-Smith, Tom Parker, my brother Pav. We all kind of chipped in our own way to make it work. So money might have been coming from myself and Pav, but the gear was coming from Nick. Then the people were coming from Mark and Steph because they knew the right actors and the right people to get involved. Call sheets were coming from Steph, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
Make sure they get done right. So you got so much collaboration with these amazing group of people that you never take credit yourself. You just, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And your costuming.
That was me, probably. That was me and Pav just up till crazy hours of the morning trying to make sure it worked.
And where did you, without any background in costuming, without any background in filmmaking, formal schooling and that, you've pulled some costumes that are straight off the set of Game of Thrones or any major production like that. On screen, they look fantastic. And even wearing them, I went, well, this feels and looks real. It's not like, you know what I mean? I've been on sets where, you know, student films and that where you knew you were wearing something cheap. And then when you saw the end result, oh, well, it works for the film.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
no, yours was, you know, it looked like it was professionally made by a professional costume designer. So how did you get that all done? Is it just asked it or you've just got something going on in your head?
Look, you're right, but it depends on what costumes you're talking about. So, like, if we had a great group of people from Ironclad Academy of the Sword that were part of our production. Cool. So those guys that were beating you up, that was their gear. They had real armor, real swords.
Fair enough.
They were happy to bring it out because they wanted to obviously showcase it as well. But I'm very blessed that those guys had that gear. But your costume we made, which was a pretty substantial costume, you had a gambeson on, you had a black cut off vest. You were pretty done up, but that was our making. We did most of the main characters. Yep. And then people who had gear would bring it. If not, we would make the gear for those people. That's awesome. But the influence just comes from probably like your son. Like you said, he loves archaeology. Well, I love mythology. I love fantasy. I've watched those fantasy films my whole life. If I didn't learn anything for the last 30 years watching those films, then you know what I mean? You know, Conan the Barbarian was one of my biggest influences, that film.
Good actor in that, wasn't it?
Schwarzenegger, yeah. Do you know he had barely any lines in that film? It was very well scored, like musically. But the costumes in that, like they didn't have the money to do special effects. So they had to make everything just look so brutal and well done. So you look at that and you go, okay, well they did it back then. We can come up with something now. And then you just make sure you put the face to the costume and the costume to the face.
Awesome. I want to talk a little bit about your media coverage that you got for that, but we might leave that to when we really bring up. Chat. So, what I want to talk about is obviously the focus of my podcast is late bloomers, old guys.
Yes.
Like myself. I'm old. And now that you've worked with a variety of actors on set, both young and old, what do you think actors? What have you learnt that actors need to build their foundation to start later in life, or just in general? Because I know a variety of actors, both from people who have never been on set to some really strong actors that have had some training and background being on some sets. So what do you see in a great actor that you want to work with?
Okay. So the first thing that I personally think that I think you have to this is going to sound dumb, learn your lines. So the first thing I'd always say is just make sure you've got those lines down packed, because then you can do whatever you want with those lines. So I did find that, you know, if I had an actor on set that was really experienced but really hadn't learnt their lines, they would get in their own head and they would overthink everything they were saying. Where if I had an actor who was fresh, who knew their lines, they would just say their lines. It might not be the greatest delivery, but that's what you're there for as a director or as a creator. You can help that person reach that capability. So I think learning your lines would be the first thing I would say is very important. And then you just go from there. And then ability to be able to, I guess, be a chameleon. Or not a chameleon. I guess so. Like, evolve to the scene. Like, if you've got a scene that you're doing with an actor and it sounded better on paper and the director's like, okay, guys, look, this isn't working the way we want, to be able to just go from, okay, what are we going to do next, and not let it be this whole day process of what you're going to do.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and obviously be considerate of your fellow actor.
Yeah, that's a big one all the time. Is not to have an ego.
Absolutely.
There's nothing worse than having an actor on set that's got an ego, whether you're a fellow actor working with them or, heaven forbid, a director who's got so much to go with.
Yeah.
And I don't think out of the times I've worked with you, I think you've had a great crew of actors, and both the experience there as well. So it's great that you've been able to work with actors who probably, a lot of them are their first time being on set, either as background or delivering lines. But you've worked with them and they've walked away with a strength of knowledge that would take months at a film school, so to speak. So.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you, because some of the actors that I had never even been on a set before, but they were striving to get onto one, and the commitment from them was just extraordinary. Like, their acting was something you would expect from something that you've seen, like, on a pretty big budgeted.
I love it.
But then you have the opposite effect. Most of the experienced people are good, but then you'd get that occasional, like, cold feet, not know the lines, and then you would, So I think it all depends on inspiring the act. The director's job should be just inspiring the actor to just run with what they've learned.
Yeah.
So not tell them how to say things, not tell them how to do things. You learn your lines, it's all yours, baby. Go and do it.
I love it.
David John Clark, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
No,
I think if you try to tell the actor how to say things, then you really, that's...
So
oh my God.
So is that something that you've learned as a now? We'll call you a director.
Okay, we'll go over that for now.
That there's so many different directors that they work differently. Where some directors will completely direct an actor and tell them from day one, this is how I do it. With others will work. Say, no, you show me what you got.
Yeah.
And we'll run with it. No, can you do it this way? That's what I like to see in a director, is that ability to work collaboratively with an actor, so to speak.
I think that makes sense. If there was heaps of money involved and the actor just wasn't getting it, then I feel like that's when the director and the producer kind of they step in, or the assistant director steps in and goes, okay, we need to move this on. But I think if you're in an independent film industry and you're a dictator director, it might not be the right place for you.
And so, with some of your roles that you've done auditions as well, haven't you? So
Yeah,
had that experience.
Warpath had them.
Yeah,
so a few people got the green light just because I was friends with them, or because they came to Are We Heroes, and I felt like I wanted to give them something back. Because I don't forget anyone. I don't just go, oh yeah, I got something out of that person, then move on. I always try to be as best as I can to people with the time I have in a day.
And so that's the thing. That's a good thing with an audition, is that you can see what they're delivering without that direction. I think most of the auditions were self-tapes that they sent to you, didn't they?
Yeah.
Did you do any in-person
Yeah,
ones?
we did. We did. I can't remember everyone that was there, but I remember Kate Bonney did hers in person. She was amazing. Like, that was so good to see one in person, because I was just getting self-tapes the whole time. And Mark and Steph's like, let's go and do one somewhere, so you can actually meet some of the actors. And I just remember there was a few people that day. I'm just trying to remember who there was. I know Ella Fenwick was there as well.
Nice.
There were a couple others, but yeah, I remember seeing Kate and being like, "Oh wow, I know who she's going to be." Straight away, I was like, "That's that character."
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and she didn't. She's great. Yeah.
So COVID's changed all that now and made most auditions are pretty much self-tapes sent in. So there's pros and cons of that for casting directors and directors. They can now see a lot more actors initially to make that decision. So can you see the pros of that? I think you mentioned it before, that you looked at Kate Bonney in person, and you've gone, I know who that actor's for. So so the more actors you could see, I suppose, in self-tape, the more chance that you're going to go, there's my so-and-so, or there's my lead actress.
Look, I don't think so, because I think the actor's that good, they're going to reflect that way anyway onto the character. I just think when I was there and she started to deliver her lines for that character, I was like, yeah, it was like, I could have just said, stop, you got it. Because it was that much of what I had written was standing in front of me delivering these lines to the character.
Gotcha.
So she reflected that character so much. I was just like, okay, well, I'll let her finish. But it's just a pretty easy decision to make. Do you know what I mean? But to be honest with you, if I can quickly touch on it,
Of course you can.
I sent out audition pieces before I had Mark and Steph involved to specific individuals that I already eyed out for certain parts of the show. And Hjalmar Martinsen, who's a professional wrestler in Adelaide, but also a professional actor, he's very good. I sent him a script with 3 characters in it. And I said, just read for them all, because, I want you read them and you tell me which character that, you feel close to, and just read for them all. Well, this guy pulled a rabbit out of the hat. He read for them all, but he read them all as if he was each character during the scene. So he would switch from one character to the other, all just talking to each other. And then I basically said to him, unfortunately, you're going to have to go this guy, even if you like those other 2, because you've just absolutely nailed this one. But that's an impressive thing you get from self-tapes that you probably couldn't necessarily get in person, I guess. He just He didn't really have too many rules to go by when reading. I just said read for the characters.
Oh.
And then he just sent it in and I was like, whoa. I called my wife and I'm like, check this guy out. And she's like, oh wow, he's awesome.
Look,
yeah, man, he is. So, he's fierce.
I think he was used in one of your promo photos once, wasn't he?
He was in. We did an interview with him.
Yeah.
And it's on YouTube, and you get to see like 20 seconds of a scene from Warpath at the end of that. And 20 seconds is enough to realise.
So, as a writer-director too, how is it, you said you wrote a lot of stuff at school and coming up, so then seeing something come into fruition, how is it to see your stuff that you've put on paper then be acted out by actors in an audition or, whether it's a self-tape or in-room, to then actually be on set, directing the actors and making the scene come to life? How does that make you feel as a writer and director? That's
the best part of it.
Yeah.
So by far, that's that whole creation process I love. Writing a character down, starting with, their name, their purpose, and then you get to see an actor bring them to life. It's like that. That's the best part.
Fantastic.
There's nothing better than that.
And to see the storyline and the story arcs all come in.
Yeah.
So it's kudos to people that can do that, because I like to be on this side of the camera because I prefer to just bring a character to life. I struggle sometimes with my self-tapes because I'll just deliver what I deliver. But if I have a director or someone, if I'm on set, that's where my best work comes out, because I'll deliver something and I say, how about we do this? It only takes one take and then bang, I can do it. And so that's why I like when I do audition training with Greg Apps or something like that, so I can, how about you do it this way? I didn't even think about that sort of thing. Whereas sometimes my self-tapes for auditions can be lacking.
Okay.
So, and I think it's great that to know someone like yourself, that to be involved and to see that whole project, the process come to an end, and to be part of it. So
fair enough. Yeah, no.
And like you said, it's such hard work being an independent filmmaker to make something to get from A to B.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree.
And you haven't got grey hair yet?
Oh, a little bit on the sides. That's since I had children, though. I stress too much for them.
Cool. All right. I really want to get on, and you've got something to talk about Warpath at the moment, but I just want to one quick step back. You talked about memorisation of lines before, and I like to ask people this: do you have any tricks or treats for actors out there that you think to make the lines work? Well, you've done a bit of acting yourself.
I have, and I'm not going to lie. I'm not the best at remembering lines. But what I will say is, don't worry about how you're going to say the lines until you've learned those lines 100%. So even if you sound like a robot when you're remembering those lines and there's no gutso in it yet, don't worry about it. Just get those lines in here and then start working on what you're going to do with them.
Beautiful.
Okay? Don't worry about
even if that's on set.
You should know them before then.
No, but as in how you deliver it, so you know your lines on there, but...
and then go in, and then you should be collaborating. There'll be post-production with a director sitting down, talking about, what should we do here with this one? Oh, this sounds cool. It sounds cool. It's not post-production, my bad. Pre-production, you should be talking about that when you do your script reads and stuff like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you would do your fight choreography. Would that sort of be the same process? How does an actor learn those scenes? And how do you teach that? Because you teach it now, don't you? Through Type Talent?
Through Type. Mark Cherrett got me doing that. He's a great dude. Very, very, very welcoming person to his school. So he was really well touch base with me about, oh man, no one's doing this. Do you want to give it a crack? And I actually known him for years. I didn't even realise he was doing anything in the acting world. So he just touched base and said some of the students are interested in this.
Yeah.
But that's a different process. But I teach it to suit the camera. I don't teach people how to be Bruce Lee and really kill people. No. I teach them how to fight to be able to fight correctly within the camera frame, the framing of whatever the frame is. So if it's a close up, a wide, a dirty, whatever the shot is, that's what I teach them to fight for. But it's actually very easy. It's so much easier. I think people just doubt themselves.
Yeah.
As soon as you create some inspiration in someone for them to back themselves, it's a whole different... They just change straight away. And all they need to do is see themselves on camera. once doing a good job, and then they're like, whoa, it actually doesn't look that bad. Then you'll see them step up their standard every time.
Because you think, oh, you know, you're doing the old face away from the camera's a mile away, but then you see it on camera. Because I've done one bit with you on that weekend when you had the open house when Type Talent did all the different sections. That was the first time I'd ever done it. So, and then I remember being up in Alice Springs. We were up there with my family, and we had the camera out, and I was just messing with Connor.
I saw that.
Yeah, and it works.
Yeah, man, it's not that hard.
A bit of a blood pack, if you want. It doesn't take much to make the scene work.
Absolutely.
So, and what's your background for fight choreography? Let's speak English
That's
today.
okay. I can speak Greek if you want. So basically, I did like a kickboxing for years. That was how it started. Like Jean-Claude Van Damme was my hero growing up. I'm not going to lie.
Awesome.
Every one of his films, I've got it. And it was like watching the coolest thing ever. From his jumping split kicks to, you know, his splits on the kitchen bench to his...
Can you do that?
I cannot do that. There would have been a time where I could. But it just, as a kid, you see these cool moves and you grow up learning them.
Yeah.
And then that was my inspiration. And then I just taught myself how to do that through kickboxing again for about 10 years. But again, you don't do real kickboxing in fight choreography. You just utilize the moves to suit the screen.
Well, I was on. I did. I've forgotten the words. On set for. What's that big movie that they made here in Adelaide?
Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat. Thank you very much.
Fatality.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I was on set for Mortal Kombat.
Okay.
And the fighters there were proper fighters.
Yes.
But I remember talking to them. I remember them listening that to switch from real fighting to movie fighting was such a big problem because they're used to actually connecting, and
100%.
all of a sudden they were apparently not allowed to connect.
You do not connect. Man, this is about as far as probably this is the closest you would get to someone's face.
And they did, and it's absolutely brilliant. You could actually see how much training they'd done previously. It's a bit like Matrix, you know, that was weeks and months that they learned how to... I mean, they actually learned to fight, but you've got to learn to fight for movie fighting as well. You can't teach them, because then you've just got to reteach them, don't you?
Well, a real fight's boring. It wouldn't last very long.
Well, no,
a few good hits and it's over.
They're all done. So, that's interesting. So that's something that you're going to keep running with?
I think so. I think people like it. Like in the last 2 years, I've discovered by their own talents, their own hidden talents, that they have some amazing people that have some skills that they need to showcase. Daisy. So Daisy Fryer and I never knew each other before Are We Heroes? But she's an amazing stunt woman.
One of SA's best.
I can't believe how good she is. Yeah. And then there's some other people that I met through the stunt world. See, I'm not a stunt person, so I can't claim anything like that. But then teaching them fight choreography, you know, and it's men and women. There's so many women out there that are so good at it too. I think people underestimate how cool tough chicks actually are and how cool they fight. And you'll probably see a lot of that in Warpath as well.
That's awesome.
So, well, I won't get into that too much. We'll talk about it when you're ready. But
I reckon we're ready.
We can go spiral into that.
Alrighty. So
the rabbit hole.
So, I mean, we've talked a lot about Warpath. And that's the big thing. I mean, that's where Are We Heroes led to that, and that's was Warpath in your head when you made Are We Heroes?
So the story, same world, it is the same universe. So the story was it was written down as a narrative, not a script, which is like completely different. So yes, it was
awesome.
Yeah.
And did you envisage it would become as big as it has become?
No. Hence, look, I'm not going to... we'll talk about it all after I reckon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so you want to do the trailer?
Yeah, put the trailer on.
All right, so what we're going to do for everyone that's listening, Aron has the trailer for Warpath, which I won't say, I don't know when it's coming out. I don't know. That's all what he
this year.
may or may not say
Definitely
afterwards.
This year.
But we're going to play the trailer so we can film my reactions to it. You're going to hear it on the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm sorry, you're not going to see it. There'll be an official release later on, but you do get to hear it. And you get to see my reactions. So I'm going to lean across the camera now, and
we will talk about it
during. Or
we'll
after?
Talk after.
Yes,
we'll talk after.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's just hope it works. You can crank the volume if you want. I just don't know how loud it's going to get.
We'll find out.
Let's find out. We can just redo it.
Here we go.
Who are you? I'm Gideon.
I know that guy.
What do you see? My father. He wrote about this place. Your father was a fool. He thought he could change the world with his little words. What are words against the fury of war? Everything.
I'm looking for someone. A man by the name of Matthias. I need to get to Ardencoll.
Remember, this is in Adelaide.
The Iron Conqueror has his hunters after me, and Ardencoll is the safest place.
I've separated my chronicles throughout the lands of Valanthra. It will lead you to the answers you seek. Would you like to come? It will be a dangerous quest.
Exactly.
Where did you learn to fight like that?
My parents taught me.
You are a simple man,
Hey.
but let me warn you, this world is about to become a lot more complicated than ever we expected it to be. Soon, there will be no room for simplicity.
Ever since I've had possession of this, I felt a darkness growing over me.
I dream of a world that lives in peace. I know one day that world will exist. I swear it.
It's locations.
He was once this country's brain.
Awesome.
The man is dead.
You stood for something once.
Hey, Tim.
You're a disgrace.
Be sure you're the man your country needs.
Are you willing to start a war? Only war. This is a war for love. It's the only war worth fighting.
They killed my brother. They killed my sisters. I will kill them all.
They want to fight, and we'll give them exactly what they want.
Yeah.
Fight with your hearts. Fight with your steel. Fight with your blood.
Watch him closely.
Hey. That's awesome, man. Look at that. Wow.
Pretty good.
That is
Not bad.
awesome.
It's an epic journey.
It is. That is fantastic.
There you go, Dave.
Well, you heard it here, ladies and gentlemen, right on set.
I hope they heard it.
I can trick later on and put the audio over the top, so that's cool. That is fantastic. That is fantastic. And,
Yes, big work.
wow. And I mean, it just goes back to what I was saying for the locations. Just on the trailer, just seeing how awesome some of those things, and the drone shots over the beach, and that is fantastic. How does that make you feel seeing it yourself?
Yeah,
I mean,
good.
you've probably watched it. How
Probably
many
watched it
times
a million times. No, it makes me feel good. I get more excited about people's reactions to it. And yeah, so I just hope people like seeing themselves in that world.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So now, you can tell me what you can tell me. South Australians, everyone that's been involved, it's become a big thing. I don't think there's anyone in the acting industry in South Australia that doesn't know about Warpath Chronicle, and so many people have been involved in it, and everyone's hanging to see it. Now, nothing happens quickly in filmmaking,
No.
Especially when it becomes an independent production.
Of course.
We're talking a series here. How many episodes have we got?
So we've got 11 episodes, and they're about 45 minutes a piece, depending on the episode.
Wow.
So you're looking at like a significant amount of time, and you have to either choose to go with the original size or cut it down.
Yes.
So sometimes things end up on the cutting room floor. But that's not the main reason it's delayed though. The delay came from, we were pretty much ready to release it when COVID happened, and then that caused huge delays from a collaborating process to networks not having them. I won't say which, but there was networks that were open to specific kind of content.
Yes.
And then they stopped doing that because of funding and all this other stuff. So, it's been a bit of a journey. At the end of the day, though, and I think this is probably just goes out to everyone that was involved. You're going to see it, and it's going to look really good and feel really good. And I think I never got involved in this to make $1 from it. I got it to make a show with South Australian actors and promote South Australia. It's all about showcasing South Australia. And if I get $10, $10,000 or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's like...
but to have it out there
for the world to see. Exactly. Fantastic. Yeah. And that's been my priority. And, you know, we all work our normal jobs, all of us.
Oh, yeah.
We're all just workers. Myself, Steph, Mark, Nick, all of us. We work our jobs. And we have to do all of this editing and collaborating outside of it all.
Yeah. I mean, filmmaking itself, your days on set were the same as any film or any TV show.
Exactly.
12-hour days.
Yep.
And that's for the actors. And then you've got you starting early in the morning to set up and pack up. So 14, 15-hour days and then have to go to work the next day. Yeah. So that's just... The fact that we're even watching a trailer is just a testament to your dedication to making it work. I love it.
Yeah.
So do you have a release date?
You'll see it this year.
Definitely.
End of the
year. It's
October. No, it's at the end of the year.
Awesome. And are you able to say how or where? Or
not yet, no.
That's cool.
Can't say exactly where, but it's coming out at the end of the year. And everyone will know that's been involved. Will get an email
how and where
and everything. Okay. We will be doing this private screening for the people that were involved as well. Or
every episode?
Everyone we can fit into the space.
Every episode?
I don't know yet. There hasn't been talk. We should do a big long. All right, you got 350 minutes.
Yeah, we'd do that long, wouldn't it? All out. That's fantastic.
It just depends. But we're not. This is coming from me, and I'm sure the guys would agree with me. It's not going to go past this year. We want people to see it, and regardless of anything else, the most important thing to me is all those people that worked on it need to see this sooner than later. There's not much to do. It's pretty much done.
That's awesome.
So my loyalty is to the people that were in it, not to anything else. So I'm happy to not delay it any further and release it because it is pretty much complete.
Yes.
And I think people are going to love it this way. I think any more gallivanting around, overthinking about it is just going to delay it further for no reason.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of work behind it, and I want you to release it in the way that you want to release it.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, whether you make money from it or not, you've made this to be at where you're at now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
To showcase your work and the actors' work in South Australia. So maybe South Australian tourism can take.
I was thinking about doing something like The Hobbit. You know, when you take people to locations. Oh, this is where this was filmed.
I love it.
The battle of the Battle of Bard Hill was here. The Battle of the Black Vulture Beach was here. Like, there's all these locations that we used. Yeah, that in Warpath that are just like exceptional. Like, and we had a lot of people watching us film. That's the other thing.
Yeah, and a lot of people are interested, you know. So, and I touched on before. So you've received a little bit of media flowing of this.
Yeah.
I think there was Adelaide Advertiser in June 2019 did a nice story there with Daisy Fryer and Tim.
Yeah, that was awesome.
All kid out. I think Radio Adelaide?
Yeah.
Chatted about as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any others, but that was started to get a bit of
That's
momentum.
when the momentum started. Yeah. That's because we were on day 49. That was day 49. And for anyone listening that has been involved, we finished on day 90.
90. Wow.
So 90 days of filming. And that's not one scene a day. That was probably about 2 to 3 scenes per day.
And that doesn't count all the stuff on the side, all your prep. I don't know where we're at.
We got cut off. It's okay.
All right, we had a bit of technical issues there, but what I was trying to say is the people listening to the podcast unfortunately didn't get to see what I was watching, and hopefully the sound sort of portrays a bit of what it is. But the end product that you've got there is just, I'll say it again, Game of Thrones. It's absolutely brilliant. The actors look fantastic. The scenes look fantastic. The fight scenes are just immense. You're happy with that end result, obviously.
I'm happy, yeah. I'm happy with absolutely. Yeah.
And
couldn't ask for more.
And now we know, so we're getting a release date. It's finally coming. So I know South Australians, both people involved in the production and people that have been following the production have been hanging and hanging and hanging. And it's one of those things we do see a lot of films and a lot of things made that you tend to, most things get finished, but sometimes things don't get finished, and sometimes things take a long time, and people get impatient. And I know you've probably seen a lot of impatience.
Yes, I have.
But just talking to you now about how big this is, and it makes sense that it's taken so long. Because it is a big job. It's not being done by professionals down at the studios who are editing 8-9 hours a day. You had to do it in your own time with volunteers.
Yeah,
volunteers.
That's what we all are, really. Yeah, we're all volunteering
to get it done and to do it properly. And so you've done that now. Heaven forbid if you actually recorded the hours you've put into editing, have you? Because 90
Bill
days
Gates
of
would
film,
have nothing on me.
So 90 days of filming, and heaven forbid if you put an hours to it. So we were talking before with everyone that's involved in this, both actors in South Australia, up and coming actors and new actors and everything like that, that you came into a lot of walls in your process to get a film made. So now that you've finally made it, can you sort of discuss a bit what walls were presented to you as a filmmaker that you think that we as actors and content creators and makers in South Australia need to take on board?
Okay, so I'll try to be gentle with my answer because I can be a bit over truthful. I was probably met with more negativity than positivity. So like when I first spoke to someone about this who was in a pretty professional space, they almost told me I had to be a runner before I could be anything else. And that was mainly to learn how sets work, which is fair enough, which is some good advice. But they didn't consider anything else. Like they didn't consider even looking at the product, even looking at, okay, well, what exactly is Aron pitching here? So on and so forth. So that was the first bit of advice I got. But what I didn't do is go back and go, well, maybe I should just be a runner and forget about writing stories. Okay. So I didn't take that advice to that point. I just thought, nah, you know what? I'm gonna see what other people have to say. So you might get met with some resistance. You might have people scoff at you, think you're crazy, think it's not doable because Joe Blow hasn't done it yet, or because it's not the normal process. Sometimes people think, oh, it's been getting done like this for the last 20 years. It works. But then we're not going to change. But how much talent in the last 20 years have you missed? What opportunities have flown by because you've decided to go with, oh, it works?
Fair enough.
Do you know what I mean?
Or how many productions have been made that were great or good in their way, but lost so much of what they could have been because they were made with a handy cam or whatever. So
whatever it might be. I think the important thing is for the director, the writer, the actor, the producer, not to go and take the back foot or just run away from wanting to achieve their goals if they are met with that resistance. I think if you can just be a little bit persistent and stubborn, you'll probably find that you get your work. Someone will want to see your work on screen and you'll find a way of making it happen. Awesome. So just try to be positive, be a little bit stubborn, and definitely be persistent in getting it out there. If you really think it's worth getting it out there, then do it. Just do it.
Well, it's interesting because I've been listening to some motivational speech and music when I'm in the gym lately, and I had Arnold Schwarzenegger do one of his speeches just yesterday, and he says he was told so many times, you can't do that. So, because they said, oh, your body's too big, you can't. And he said, well, I can. And then he got Conan.
Yeah.
And the director said in an interview afterwards, they said, well, if we hadn't had Arnold, we would have had to make him. So his negative became positive. And then when they say that's impossible, Arnold would say, no, I'm going to make it possible. Yeah. So that's what you're saying. If you've got a dream, if you've got a desire, just go and make it. The worst thing that can happen is that you tried, and you fail.
But you don't fail.
You can't make something if you don't try.
That's right. So, and if you've made it, you haven't failed. You've created the thing that you wanted to make.
Exactly right. And then you learn from that. And I mean, you've actually got to the end product. You've made your product and it looks fantastic and it's going to be exciting to see. And so now you have that next step. You can now take that and run with it.
Yeah.
So before I go into the wind-up questions, what is next for Aron and
I think
your filmmaking?
Well, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm working on that Blood City with Jason and Paddy, helping them out, just kind of collaborative work on that. Those two guys are great. They got the same sort of like enthusiasm.
Yeah.
They want to just get their product, do a good
making it
product,
happen.
make it happen. Don't worry about all the little political things that need to occur in between it.
Yeah.
But I'd like to keep teaching fight for screen. That's something that I've got a pretty big passion about. And you don't just teach that with it. You teach, you encourage, and you teach confidence. Because how can you not get confident if you learn how to kick ass on screen? If you know what I mean?
Definitely.
So that's something I'm going to be doing. I really am focusing on just making sure once Warpath is out, then I'm going to shift my focus to something I'm doing called Mercs. That's a web series I'm going to pitch next year.
Cool.
Filmed again in SA. Actually filmed near Tailem Bend. That's a post-apocalyptic comedy action kind of thing.
Because post-apocalyptic stuff's my favourite.
Yeah, I know. Don't worry. I thought of you in that wig.
Well, that's all, and that's also, and you've got something that can sell now, can't you? You can say, well, this is my work, so.
Yeah.
So Warpath can be now your selling point.
That's my big stepping stone.
Because people can say, you did that on your own,
Yeah.
and now you're putting your hand up for some assistance, or you want to work with, collaborate with bigger groups, or to get your funding, and that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Especially in South Australia, because you said there was such a lot of old sticklers. Is that the good word for?
I don't know what it is. I think it's just we have.
That's my dog snoring. Bonnie.
I think it's just not just South Australia. I think just there's a mentality of it's been done this way for so long. There's no point in changing.
Mm-hmm.
Something I learnt in my last, I won't say where I work, but I used to work somewhere, and the big thing there was when you're at your top of your game, you change your game.
Yep.
Because if you get stale, you'll miss out on lots of opportunities.
Fair enough.
So I think that's what doesn't happen enough. I think we just have a way, and we're set in this way of doing things, and I think that huge opportunities are missed. Like I have met some people in the last 5 years that are 10 times better than anyone I know in the last 10 years that are doing fight for screen, acting, but they've been missed because they're just not, I don't want to get too political, but it's just
fit into a mold
they didn't
or
fit
something,
into like the right crowd to get into the project that you know what I mean. But their ability is unbelievable. So
I think that's big in in Australian TV is that we're now losing drama and we're losing shows in Australia because they haven't changed. So Australian TV itself now is all reality because
I know
there's nothing new. But all the good shows on your streaming networks are starting to build. We all watch the American ones, but we're starting to get some really top quality Australian series now, and the TV networks probably need to learn from that. But it's great to see that the moneymakers in Australia are now recognising that we can make different content in Australia.
Absolutely.
And that's what's great. And just look, Warpath, a fantasy series filmed in South Australia.
Who'd have thought?
And it looks fantastic. So I must say thank you very much for putting that all together.
Yeah, you're right. Oh,
it's been an awesome journey to watch you to do it from Are We Heroes to this and to be a part of it as well. So I'm really excited that I've been on that journey with you. So,
thank you.
All right. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I like to end with a couple of nice relaxing so we can de-stress some stress. First question is, what would your T-shirt quote be? If you
T-shirt quote?
I mean, I'm wearing my Late Bloomer Actor shirt at the moment because I do that when I'm in the room. I did that with Tim. So if you were to get a shirt that had a message on it that you want to say, do you have something that you would say?
I don't know. One of them's already taken. I just say be tenacious. That'd be my quote.
Nice.
Or just do it, but that's already taken.
Yeah. I think I've had someone say just do it before, but we might be
tenacious.
We'll go with that one.
Absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. And we were talking just before the streaming TV. Are you binging anything on TV at the moment?
Yes. Two things. Oh, I've already binged them, so I'll just say what they are. So Cobra Kai, definitely.
I haven't had a chance yet. I've heard good things.
David John Clark. No, it's really good. It's really
I'm
good.
a shift worker, and the problem with my binging is I've got my wife Kelly loves 98% of the stuff that I like, so we need to watch it together. So it makes it really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So I've got a list of all my shows that we want to watch, and we're looking when we retire, we'll be binging everything.
Okay,
cool. And were you going to say anything else?
Cobra Kai, and I'm a huge fan of The Witcher.
Nice. We've started The Witcher, so it's a good show.
Yeah.
That's interesting for your discussions on fantasy and stuff. So
it's very I think that's it's mind-boggling when you first watch The Witcher. So make sure you be open-minded when you go in.
That makes me think that, do you see yourself working on something like that, on a big Hollywood
I'd love
production
to.
one day?
Yeah, something like that would be amazing.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, you've got all those credentials now. I think you can probably take it and make it work. So,
Try my best.
and look forward to that.
If they have me.
Do you have a most inspirational actor or a director in the industry?
In the whole industry? Like celebrity?
Someone that inspires you to do what you've done or to keep going, or now that
I've got a friend in Adelaide.
A director?
Look, there's an actor. There's a few actors in Adelaide that I think are amazing. I won't mention them all. They all know who they are because I probably tell them too many times. But there's a guy in Adelaide that I met at the end of casting for Warpath called David Daradan. He inspires me, because we are similar, and I think like when I doubt myself, he's probably the only guy that would just literally come up to me. He's like, dude, you got to do that again. He would just tell me, I'm like, okay, man, no worries.
Awesome.
So like, he's just really open, and I can take his feedback on like almost as gospel, you know, like it's truth.
I did see David on the trailer, didn't I?
Yeah, Daradan's in it. So like, I really think David Daradan's just he's got a whole array of things he can do, which is great. And yeah, he's taught me a lot on the download. So has Mark and Steph, definitely. But I think having those chats with Daradan, he just gets in here on a different level.
And he's back in Adelaide now.
Yeah. He's been in Melbourne, now he's in Adelaide. And then as a famous actor, I'd probably say, it's funny, probably Gerard Butler. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Gerard.
Unlike some people who can't pronounce surname.
Oh, wow. But I saw him in Attila the Hun, which was a Hallmark movie.
Okay.
This story's real quick, but it'd be Gerard Butler. And I remember seeing him in that, going, man, this guy looks cool. And then he was in 300.
Yeah.
And that's where it all happened.
300. It's one of those movies.
I'm on this podcast
list.
with a guy that hasn't seen 300.
I know. It's terrible. I've seen.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, it's on my list.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome.
Yeah, probably that. Two.
Sorry?
They're the two actors.
Awesome. That's great. And I love that it's someone local that can kick you in the butt, so to speak, and that gives you something. So that's fantastic. And it's all about collaboration and teamwork, isn't it? Filmmaking. And you've got an awesome team.
100%. Yeah. And don't hold back when people want to learn. Tell them, share your knowledge. That's what I would say. People always say to me, Aaron, why do you share so much about how to make films? You know, you could make money from this, or you shouldn't share all your secrets. So I'm like, you know what? It's such a hard industry to get into. So if you know something that's helped you, share it with someone else. I know that's scary, but I would share as much knowledge as I can with people.
I love it. And a lot of both actors and filmmakers, people say you've got to. It's such a hard industry that you can't share because you might give someone else a leg up. I don't think it's like that. I think, man. Especially for actors, you are the actor for that role or you're not. So you helping someone else out isn't going to mean you're going to miss out. So it's why I run my Adelaide Actors and Extras page, because it allows me to share information, allows me to bring filmmakers like yourself in together and collaborate and share and bring resources in.
100%.
It's why I run the podcast now, to share information and bring people together. So what am I getting out of it? I'm getting out of the fact that I'm helping other people, and that's what I love. So,
that's great.
So thank you very much.
That's all right.
Is there anything that we think you might have missed on the podcast that you'd like to bring up before we say goodbye?
I just a huge thank you to everybody that participated in the making of Warpath Chronicle. Awesome. I know we didn't just come on here to talk about that, but every single person, you have 100% my appreciation, and I know that Mark, Steph, Nick, Tom, Pav, and everyone else that was on the production side of it also appreciates the time and effort put in. So I don't want people to know. I want people to know that definitely haven't been forgotten. It's just been a giant project, and we're finally at the end.
Awesome. And
so thank you.
Giving people their recognition. I know that I'm behind you to do your IMDb, so we'll get, if you're still on
once we get that,
we'll get it up on IMDb, so everyone will get their credits. So they'll be able to, from the biggest actors down to the lowest actors who have never done anything, they'll be able to see their name attached to Warpath on IMDb, and that's their credit and the recognition, which is awesome. And
if I see him anywhere, I'll buy him a drink. That's going to cost me a lot of money.
Awesome. Well, Aaron, thank you very much for coming on board. I know we had some technical issues, so let's fingers crossed that it's all there. Otherwise, you're going to have to come in and we'll have to remember what we said. But thank you very much. Thank you for letting me see the trailer. That
No
is
worries.
awesome. I can't, and obviously everyone will get to see it soon when
Yes.
you publicly release it.
Yes.
And then the series will be available. You first heard it here on the Late Bloomer Actor podcast. Warpath coming to a screen to you somewhere before
Soon.
the end of the year.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thank
Ciao.
you.